emerging fields. And after that, I will focus on the application of geoethics to geological hazards and risks. Well, I would like to start highlighting that geoethics is not simply professional ethics, even if professional ethics is an essential aspect of geoethics, but that's not all. Originally, geoethics was developed in the context of geosciences to increase the awareness of geoscientists on their ethical responsibility and the social and cultural role they can play into society. But over time, geoethics has expanded to define a way in which all the human beings can rethink their relationship with the Earth system in the light of principles and values that can provide a healthy and safe life in the respect for geo-ecosystems. Let's start by fixing two important points. The first is, why do we need geoethics? Human action have a profound impact on social ecological systems that are complex sets of closely interconnected natural and anthropic elements. So which are the best way to manage the interaction between humans and those delicate systems? Second point, geosciences are an indispensable support for society to identify effective strategies and solutions to current global environmental problems and economic sustainability. So, which are the best ways for geosciences to contribute to help society and assure a sustainable development to human communities? This is the ambit in which we are moving, and the decisions we have to take need understanding of the problems to be faced, knowledge of the tools we have in our hands to try to solve those problems, awareness of our role as geoscientists, and responsibility of the consequences of our actions. Understanding which are the right or at least acceptable solutions and decisions to improve our interaction with the Earth is an issue of utmost urgency for geoethics. Well, let's see now the definition of geoethics that is fundamental to understand the aim, the subject, and the perimeter of the geoethics field. Geoethics consists of research and reflection on the values which underpin appropriate behaviors and practices wherever human activities interact with the Earth system. This part of the definition clearly expresses the subject, the aim, and the function of geoethics, the identification of those values capable of guiding humans towards appropriate behaviors and practices in relation to the Earth. The second part of geoethics definitions states that geoethics deals with the ethical, social, and cultural implications of geoscience knowledge, education, research, practice, and communication, providing a point of intersection for geosciences, sociology, philosophy, and economics. This sentence indicates the focus and the approach of the geoethical studies, highlighting the centrality of geoscience in developing a geoethical thinking, but at the same time pointing out that inputs coming from other disciplines are essential to define the values of geoethics, and underlining that the geoethical subject is a multifaceted subject, a meeting point of several areas of knowledge which must cooperate in a multidisciplinary way and integrate effectively. The definition of geoethics outlines the perimeter of the geoethical analysis and action, highlighting the need to preliminarily identify the values, those common values on which to base human choices affecting the planet, considering geosciences as the indispensable set of disciplines to shape responsibly and sustainably the human-Earth system relationship. Starting from the definition, let's go more in depth in the wide framework of contents proposed by geoethics. Geoethics is definable as an ethics of the human agent towards the Earth, where the Earth is to be intended as a complex system consisting of biotic and abiotic elements, but also technological and cultural ones. Geoethics proposes a philosophical reflection and a practice, both individual and social, potentially extendable to society as a whole, while respecting and implementing the contribution of all people on the Earth with different knowledge, experiences, and to solve global problems. This is why geoethics is inclusive. But diversity needs to be managed into a common ethical framework capable of assuring a reasonable alignment of values, capable of going beyond the interests of single individuals or communities and their conflicting expectations, capable of placing itself along a common human horizon of sharing. A distinctive feature of geoethics is that it is centered on the human agent, placed at the center of an ethical reference system in which individual, social, and environmental values coexist and support personal responsibilities. Responsibilities articulate according to different levels of interactions or domains of the human experience that become gradually wider, more complex and intricate. The self, the social groups to which individuals belong, including professional ones, society and future generations, and the environment. The geoethical reference values are applied within these four existential and interactive domains. In the geoethical vision, the human agent moves within these domains and from time to time acts consciously according to an analytic and prudent approach based on the principle of responsibility. But a responsible choice has to have freedom as its fundamental principles, because without freedoms it's not possible to act ethically. Being in a condition of freedom allows one acting by one's own conscious and well-pondered choice, rather than under compulsion with all the possible negative consequences that may derive. Geoethics is therefore characterized as an ethics of virtue, in which the human agent consciously adheres to a framework of reference values centered on honesty, awareness, integrity, transparency, reliability, competence, and follows virtuous behaviors based on care, coherence, prudence, wisdom, dialogue, and good sense. Such behaviors contribute, along with those of other individuals, to establish a human-Earth system relationship that is founded on the recognition of the dignity of all the elements that make up the social ecological systems. Each of us, as human agent, acts within a participative process aimed at solving issues starting from scientific knowledge of the planet, informed by human experience. Geoethics puts in the foreground the individual responsible action based on the adoption of professional and social reference values. Its development and application take place within a pragmatic, open, and continuous process of reviewing choices, supported by the work of scientists aware of their social role at the service of society. Behaviors inspired by geoethics are the result of scientifically based choices. Choices in line with the geoethical vision should take into account the variety of human cultures, knowledge, and social conditions that characterize each context globally, as well as they cannot ignore the physical, chemical, biological peculiarities of the territories that will be involved in anthropic interventions. These choices must therefore be contextualized in space and time. An analytical and critical approach to solve problems has to be based on equity to guarantee the same opportunities for social, economic, and cultural development to the various human groups and to future generations. And it has to be aimed at building a more just society in a natural environment that is not degraded even in cultural and aesthetic terms. The definition of prescriptive behaviors and rules that underestimate the importance of the context in which they must be applied could trigger opposite effects, inducing antagonistic tensions and an a priori rejection by the population. So the geoethical approach takes into account the space-time complexity of existing physical and social realities, identifying their technical, environmental, economic, cultural, and political limits, in the awareness that similar problems may require different solutions in different contexts. So, concepts such as prevention, diversity, sustainability, adaptation, protection of the territory, geo-environmental education, conservation of environmental and aesthetic quality of nature that have a clear social dimension become reference values for the geoethical action. To conclude this first part, few hints to recent development in the geoethical thinking. In the geoethical perspective, the ongoing environmental crisis can prove to be a great opportunity for an authentic cultural change and development of wisdom to be lived without fear, guided by science, and illuminated by our authenticity of humans. But this will be possible only on condition that each of us, according to his/her personal abilities and possibilities, operates in an ethical framework in which the duty to ensure rights comes first to the right to demand duties. And this is the concept developed and pointed out in our recent proposal for a responsible human development charter. Well, what I have explained so far are the main theoretical features of geoethics, the concept and values that constitute its theoretical basis. To learn more about these aspects, I invite you to visit the IAPG website. IAPG is the International Association for Promoting Geoethics, where you can download some publications for free. Now, this is the link to the website in the slide. Now, as I have anticipated, I will talk about geoethics applied to the field of geological hazards and risks, highlighting how geoethics can support an effective disaster risk management, with particular attention to aspects to risk communication and geoeducation towards the public. Geological risk is an issue of great interest for geoethics due to its strong connection with society and its enormous repercussions on the development of many countries all over the world, including India and Italy, my country, where the costs of geological disaster constantly hang over the Italian economic situations. I would start from the consideration that over the centuries, disasters have always scared populations. The fear is not eliminable, but the proper dissemination of scientific knowledge and an adequate preparedness can help to find strategies for mitigating their effects. Nowadays, the scientific progress can assure us a good level of safety. Obviously, the damage due to geohazard is not entirely avoidable, but can be greatly reduced through prevention and mitigation efforts, through an effective information and education of society. Geoscientists have to become more aware of being not only scientists or professionals, but also social actors. Geologists, engineers, and in general experts of the earth possess the scientific knowledge and preparation to bring science closer to society. Well, which is the relationship between geoethics and georisks? Allow me to mention the words of the Italian architect Pirro Ligorio that, in my opinion, can give us the primary idea of our ethical involvement in the risk mitigation. In the 16th century, Ligorio affirmed that to understand the causes of geological phenomena and to find a way to defend the population from damages are prerogatives that are in the possibilities of our human rationality. And added, trying to reach the safety of our houses is not only a necessity, but also an ethical duty of the human intellect. 4 centuries ago, Ligorio introduced the concept that as rational beings, and so as scientists, we do have an ethical duty that is to defend our fellow human beings from geological phenomena, since we are able to study them and in many cases to predict their effects. Well, in which way geoethics can guide towards a better living with risks that threaten our territories? In the field of the disaster risk reduction, geoethics fosters the proper and correct dissemination of the results of scientific studies, develops and promotes geoeducational tools for the population, aims to improve the relationships between the scientific community and the other components of the society, such as politicians, mass media, citizens, during all the different phases that characterize the disaster cycle: phase of prevention, emergency, and recovery. But let's go in order. What do we mean by risk? We all know that the risk is defined as the symbolic product of hazard, vulnerability, and exposure. It is quantified such as the loss produced on an element or group of elements at risk as a consequence of the occurrence of a given phenomenon of a given intensity. The hazard is the probability that the phenomenon of a given intensity occurs in a certain area in a given time interval. The vulnerability is the capability of an element to resist to a given phenomenon. And finally, the exposure is the value of the elements at risk in terms of human lives or economic value or historical artistic value in a certain area. These factors have been introduced to analyze the impact of natural phenomena on humankind, and their effects are quantified using mathematical tools, included the probability calculus and the evaluation of errors and uncertainties. Yes, errors and uncertainties. The uncertainty of science is a fundamental concept, maybe not sufficiently emphasized. Nowadays, scientists are able to predict with some degree of uncertainty the onset and development over time of some natural phenomena. Moreover, the progress of science is giving us new tools to defend ourselves against natural risks, new methods for the continuous monitoring of the phenomena, use of early warning methods, efficient building techniques to ensure safety, adequate prevention programs, careful land management, appropriate education to citizens. All these activities are what we call prevention. Prevention can allow us to achieve a safer way to live with georisks. But at the same time, science doesn't provide absolute certainty. In fact, especially in relation to geohazards, elements as uncertainty and probability affect the way in which we can manage the risk. As the Italian astrophysicist Margherita Hack said, on the art, not everything is predictable, but science can also serve when it forces the absolute unpredictability. As you know well, geoscientists are not able, for example, to establish at the same time when, where, and how strong an earthquake will occur. Nevertheless, that doesn't mean we cannot find solutions that can reduce the risk, that can allow us to live with natural phenomena and to develop appropriate policies in risk management, even in the absence of full scientific certainty. Well, how can we manage uncertainty? In 1992, the Precautionary Principle was included in the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development and in the institutive treaties of the European Union. The principle states that we must suspend all activities potentially able to harm human health or the environment, even if there aren't scientific evidences of their negative effects, or if these evidences are partial, which is to say, even if there is not the absolute certainty that this activity does not cause damage. So the problem is how to reconcile this principle with the science that cannot give absolute certainty due to its intrinsic and epistemic limits. We could risk to block any possibility of progress for humankind by adopting the precautionary principle in georisk management. On this point, a simple and wise solution has been offered by Giuseppe Grandori, an Italian earthquake engineer, who defined the acceptable limit of risk to society through this short statement. Defending oneself from earthquakes means reducing the consequences of earthquakes, casualties, and property damage below a limit that society considers acceptable, taking into account the costs that a further reduction of the limit would imply. This statement may seem cynical, but it simply recalls us to prudence and common sense, rather than to an attitude of absolute precaution. The Greek philosopher Aristotle calls the prudence practical wisdom, since it disposes the intellect to the careful and circumstantial analysis of the surrounding real world and exhorts mind to discern the true good in all circumstances, choosing the appropriate means to accomplish it. In line with Aristotle, the Italian philosopher Thomas Aquinas considers prudence as the right norm of action, not to be confused with precaution. Well, the general vision of geoethics is based on these concepts. In fact, thanks to the virtue of prudence, we apply ethical principles to particular cases, trying mistakes and overcome doubts about the choices to be made to avoid negative consequences. In every circumstance where a risk exists, we have to use the common sense and to assess the costs, but also the benefits of a risk mitigation strategy. A strategy which today may seem wasteful could be effective in a larger perspective when evaluated looking at its likely outcomes. In this regard, I would like to tell you the emblematic case of Fudai. Fudai is known as the Japanese village that in 2011, during the Tohoku earthquake, defeated the tsunami. In the 70s, the wise measure of the city did provide a wall 16 meters high that was supposed to protect citizens from possible tsunamis. For years, the building was the center of controversies, considered a useless waste of money, a mindless and disproportionate work. But in 2011, that wall saved the life of 3,000 people, while all around Fudai, other cities were razed to the ground and today have to face social and economic costs unimaginable at the time of those controversies. This little story only to emphasize that prevention is a value, but unfortunately our societies don't perceive it as a value. And what is worst, our politicians tend not to support and promote something that gives its fruit in the longer term as prevention activities. So it is our duty as experts of risk to transfer this value to society, for example, by giving emphasis to cases of good land management and consequent reduction of disasters in a certain area. Prevention has to become our rational and responsible answer to the right of safety of each citizen. But let's take a look at the ethical values of reference that experts of Georisks have to consider in their activities. A first group of values, such as ability, individual and joint responsibility, collaborative attitude, reliability, transparency, solidarity, non-discrimination, and impartiality, allows scientists to develop a good science. And making good science is the prerequisite in the strategy for an effective disaster risk reduction. These values are important, but not sufficient, because in order to increase the resilience of a community, scientists have to work so that other values and concepts, such as prevention, safety, sustainability, education, take root into society. These values are strictly connected one each other. Let's take education and prevention as an example. Only if we inform and educate citizens, we can defend them from risks. And then we will be able to replace the culture of emergency with the culture of prevention in our societies. Prevention must be intended not only in terms of cost saving, but mainly as a social and cultural attitudes that give its fruit in a short, medium, and long-term perspective. It is evident that not investing in prevention means to transfer irresponsibly the social and economic costs of a disaster on the shoulder of future generations. So prevention is above all an ethical and cultural issue. Concepts as resilience and education are of great importance, and their enhancement and spreading have to be considered values. Risks is at the same time a simple and a complex concept, and include also the social vulnerability that is related to the resilience of the community, namely to its ability to respond to a disaster by restoring the material and also the spiritual conditions existing before the event. The proper dissemination of scientific knowledge and an adequate preparedness of population can help to improve the resilience and so to reduce the risk. This is what we call geoeducation. Geoeducation can shorten the distances between scientists, population, and decision makers, avoiding the loss of confidence in science by citizens, avoiding the cultural and social marginalization of scientists, and fostering the development of risk reduction strategies that are really effective and widespread. Risk reduction requires an all-of-society engagement and partnership, as clearly indicated in the guiding principles of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. So, when we speak about georisks, guidelines, protocols, procedures, codes are indispensable, but all these regulatory measures need to be supported by a strong framework of ethical principles with a solid base on which to found all our practical actions. Professor Surya Prakash, our Indian colleague, synthesized in this simple scheme the 10 words starting with the letter C to be considered as values in the disaster risk reduction. These key words include the sense and the aim of the geological activity and imply the meaning of serving society for geoscientists. And I would also add 3 other terms to this list. Multidisciplinarity, that is not simply a practical requirement, but is primarily a value of the modern science to give more complete answers to complex problems, including the risk assessment with its many variables. Freedom that arises from an independent and critical thinking. Geoscientists should be free from political, economic, and psychological constraints because only free geoscientists can act with full ethical consciousness. Now let's go to consider that the defense against natural risks involves many actors, not only geoscientists, but also decision makers, local authorities, government agencies, mass media, citizens. All these actors form a defense system that have to act with a common goal and in the same direction each of them with a specific role, commitments, and responsibility in relation to an impending risk. Only the good relationships among them can guarantee a coordinated effort and consequently the efficiency during all the phases of the disaster cycle. A proper georisk management requires that each role is well defined and governed by shared operational protocols, especially during the emergency phase, so that overlapping and misunderstanding don't jeopardize population safety and economic activities. Well, let's see duties and common faults of each actor in a geoethical perspective. Geoscientists. Geoscientists have the responsibility to conduct an updated and reliable scientific research, which provides a detailed analysis of the epistemic uncertainty for a more effective evaluation of the errors in the prediction models. Models they use for studying risk scenarios must be well grounded on observational data, including the clear indications of their uncertainties, and discussed within the scientific community. Furthermore, they have the commitment to improve their ability in scientific communication through the use of a simplified language, but scientifically correct and suitable for different users. Finally, their commitment should be also to maintain good relationships with decision makers and media, so that a multifaceted management of criticalities is possible. All these points can strengthen the social credibility of geoscientists. But on the contrary, often geoscientists do not pay sufficient attention to the science communication activity and to its social consequences. This is the situation in Europe and in Italy, of course. I don't know if in India is the same. They are very interested in research, in teaching, in advice, but devote too little time to the dissemination of science. They usually show little availability to public debate, scarce attention to the public and politicians. They tend to use a language too much technical without taking into account those who are the final users of scientific information. Well, what about decision makers? They are responsible for the prevention and mitigation of natural hazards, but often have completely different skills than those required by their role. For example, a barrister could become the head of a regional civil protection office. So they often ignore the limits of a scientific study regarding the prediction of the hazard and the level of seriousness with which a warning could be issued to the public. So it happens they discharge their responsibility on scientists, demanding them to provide truth scenarios, while only probabilistic ones are possible. And as I have just said, in addition, they are not interested in prevention because it's a long-term activities. Very important actors are the media, because they represent the link, the interface between scientists and society. And during a crisis, they should have the duty to give people correct information necessary for the management of the emergency. They should make themselves responsible for sending public demands and expectations to politicians. But unfortunately, usually journalists have a poor qualification in earth sciences. In addition, the language they use is quite different from the language of scientists. So it happens they can misuse sentences and declarations by scientists out of the context in which they have been stated. And in the worst cases, they transform the meaning of their words in a sensationalistic way. And also the time of the media information is different from time of science. Scientists need time, journalists need the scoop. And finally, citizens. In general, among citizens, there is a scarce preparedness, and this implies their incapacity to defend themselves from risks. Just as an example, in Italy, the widespread mentality and attitude is not to take care of verifying if the building where they live meets the standards of earthquake-proof design. Often they tend to spend money for aesthetic aspects, but not for those interventions that can reduce the vulnerability of their houses and save their life during an emergency. A greater awareness of the importance of investing in safety would result in an increase of the resilience. On the contrary, a scarce preparedness produces a scarce risk perception and consequently a low resilience of the entire community. Again, in Italy, we learned about people that died during a flood to save bottles of wine from the cellar, partially underground. Many citizens often died because they ventured in an underpass invaded by waters. Well, I believe that people are not stupid, they are only uninformed. In fact, in general, citizens are considered passive actors in a risk scenario, while they can play a key role. Certainly, they have to be put in the condition to contribute constructively to their own safety. On the one hand, they have the legitimate right to demand actions in defense of their safety, but on the other hand, they have also the necessity and the duty to properly inform themselves about risks. A more prepared society, in scientific terms, well informed about the possible causes and effects of phenomena, would be able to discern the quality of the media information and force the media to become conscientious spokesperson of the social instances. They would be capable of evaluating choices of whom manage the territory and to demand from them more efficacious actions. So a virtuous circle would be triggered in which all the actors involved would assume the ethical responsibility of their role. Activities relative to the concept of citizen science are developed with this objective, and in particular in the field of natural risks, they have the long-term goal to improve the resilience of a community. Citizen science is defined as a scientific work undertaken by members of the general public, often in cooperation with or under the direction of professional scientists and scientific institutions. In other words, it is a scientific activity in which non-professional scientists voluntarily participate in the collection and analysis of data, in the development of technologies, in the evaluation of natural phenomena, and so on. Citizen science is based on the idea that knowledge is not a one-way road, and citizens can also give to scientists a support, providing them with precious insights that otherwise would have been overlooked. Various scientific fields and disciplines are involved, and among them also the field of natural hazards. For example, regarding the seismic events, some tools have been carried out for involving citizens and using them as a primary source of information. This is helpful for scientists to better develop actions for the risk management and even to obtain valuable testimonies on the earthquakes in themselves, especially for those events that are by nature transitory. When they occur, usually no scientist is on the spot, ready to record them, but local people are there and so can have the ability to help in this direction. Citizen science has a great educational and ethical value. The involvement of citizens in scientific endeavor generates knowledge, understanding, awareness, and responsibility. Citizens benefit from taking part in research, from contributing to scientific evidence, and to address local, national, and international issues, and through that, they can become potentially able to influence political choices. We can affirm that a society scientifically unprepared prevents the development of risk reduction actions really effective and widespread, and as consequence, the improvement of the resilience. Well, how can experts support society in the defense against georisk? By developing educational strategies, by disseminating scientific knowledge, by transferring appropriate and timely information on risk scenarios and consequences of unpreparedness. And adequate preparedness can help to better face the fear of a disaster and to better react for minimizing damages. Experts have the ethical duty to make society aware that science cannot be the solution to all our problems, but it can give us helpful tools to defend our lives, although it is accompanied by a certain level of uncertainty. In fact, the value of science exists only if we are aware of its limits. But let's see in details what could be done in practice by experts of georisks. Conducting their studies, verifying sources of information, adherence of results to observations and related uncertainties and errors, making data and results of their studies public, open access, and user-friendly, but with explanatory information targeted to final users. Organizing communication strategies before, during, and after the emergency phase. Transferring advanced knowledge and technology to different disaster risk reduction actors, such as industry and authorities. Participating in educational campaigns for the population, paying attention to simplify concepts without making them banal. Trying not to transfer absolute certainties, but also the limits of used methods, allowing citizens to develop a critical attitude to better understand the decision taken to face hazards. And more, increasing the synergy with government agencies and local administrations through the development of operational protocols and standards, assuring their ongoing professional training, collaborating in the training of the skills of technicians and professionals, and finally, developing a multidisciplinary approach to the problems. Finally, I would like to suggest to geoscientists that work in georisks to responsibly wonder about the deeper sense of their work. We should always ask ourselves, what is our responsibility as risk experts towards society? In which way can we support society against georisks? and on which values of reference we have to ground our activities. In each field of work, there is the possibility and the necessity for geoscientists to act ethically. In particular, for those employed in the educational field, it is fundamental to develop effective strategies and actions able to transfer appropriate and timely information on risk scenarios and consequences of unpreparedness. I repeat, geoscientists possess the proper knowledge for bringing science closer to society. And to close the circle started with Pirro Ligorio, allow me to conclude with a recent Italian story that I often use as an example to clarify what geoethics should mean. In 2002, an earthquake in Italy killed 27 children for the collapse of a school. Only one child was pulled alive from the rubble, and today that child has become a geologist. And to the question, why did you choose to graduate in geosciences? He replied, to defend land and citizens, to bring geology in all homes so that all the people understand what is an earthquake and can defend themselves. Everyone has the right to be informed, and it is the responsibility of us as geoscientists to convey to others the importance of geological knowledge to protect our geoheritage, georesources, and geoenvironment. Well, I think this is a clear explanation of what geoethics means, an explanation that strengthens our responsibility as geoscientists and our motivation to conduct in an ethical way our activities as researchers, teachers, professionals, employees in the field of geosciences and georisks. Geoethics implies communication and sharing. It is the criterion that should guide our actions, prudent and proper actions, scientifically well-grounded, based on values as prevention, safety, and sustainability. I'm personally convinced that our activities as geoscientists find their highest function in serving society. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot. This is such an informative lecture we had for the last 1 hour. Thank you a lot for enlightening us on geoethics, which is a very new topic for us. And first, I would like to open the forum for question answer discussion. Maybe we can have 5-10 minutes of question answer discussion. And I have few questions particularly for you. I will ask later. So I request all the students, if you have any question, please unmute yourself and ask. Okay, so I ask you a question that I was seeing that you are the editor-in-chief of one book series of Springer Briefs, Geoethics. So,
Yes.
So I was going through all the topics and the content on which the book proposal can be given to you. So is generally we in our university we also work on diverse topics like from flood, landslide, urban environment, climate change. So these are the topics on which we work a lot heavily. So is there any possibility to apply your geoethics concept in this kind of topic and have some kind of collaborative work?
Sorry, the audio is not very good, but I understand that you are interested in a publication in the Springer Brief.
Yeah. I was asking that the topics we generally work on, like landslide, susceptibility mapping, flood prediction, or urban climate change, urban environment. Is there any possibility of applying the concept of geoethics, the perspective of geoethics into our this kind of work? that we do.
Yes, of course, of course. As I explain in the slides, georisks in general, so floods, tsunami, earthquake, volcanic eruption are the field of utmost interest for geoethics, because it implies social vulnerability. It implies concepts such as prevention, safety, and so I really believe that a geoethical perspective in the analysis of this kind of phenomena is essential, also to understand how to apply our tools to defend ourselves from risk. So I invite you to apply the geoethical view, geoethical values in the analysis of these important aspects of our profession. If you want, we have a lot of articles on these issues. You can, some of those articles are downloaded for free from our website, and you can, there are also many case studies on these aspects, so you can find the useful tools, useful indications if you want to take this path, this kind of analysis.
Okay, thank you. I get it. So we are learning. Basically, this is a very new concept that we are introduced with today. So we are learning a lot with all this masterclass series. Yes, I got the link for publication. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Okay. Okay, so is there anyone who wants to ask something?
Ma'am, I have a question. Can I ask?
Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Dr. Pepolani. It has been a good session, an energetic session, a session that has enriched my knowledge. Ma'am, I have got 3 questions for you. The first one is, how much practicality does the concept of application of equity has in addressing the issue of geoethics in today's world?
I don't understand. Can you repeat, please?
Yeah, sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Ma'am, how much practicality does the concept of application of equity has in addressing the issue of geoethics in today's world?
I don't hear very well. Can you write in the chat your question?
Sure.
Thank you. Sorry.
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am.
How much practicality does Yes, this is a very difficult question, very difficult question, but equity is don't think also to earthquakes. Think about the ecological crisis we are suffering in these times. For example, the problems of climate change and the reduction of the emissions of carbonate, of greenhouses gases. The equity is fundamental because we need an international governance, And an international governance implies that all the communities, all the societies, human societies are put in the same condition to be free free to choice, to decide, to take decision, to take choices. Equity is one of the fundamental pillars of geoethics. When I talk about the context to be considered when we make a choice, I refer to this because there are different contexts in the world, and the same intervention on the territory can be considered in different ways. For example, a dam can be considered too much impacting the environment in general, but a dam can provide citizens with water. For example, in some countries can be useful and not considered negative like in other situations. So I don't know if I was able to explain what equity means in the geoethical perspective.
Ma'am, I did understand the concept that you tried to explain right now. And ma'am, it was quite apt and it was quite up to the mark, but I got my answer to my question. Thank you, ma'am, for your kind answer. Ma'am, I do have got one more question, if you kindly accept it. Ma'am, in your presentation, we saw a part where treaties are being signed to address the issue of this hazard that are causing harm to the human beings, like the international conventions that are being signed, that is the Rio Convention, or the treaties that are signed in the European Union. And with regard to that, we have seen that many political power blocks and international organizations are actually signing treaties to ban activities that are harming human beings. But instead of that, we are still seeing that recent events like war, such as in Ukraine and Russia, are actually harming human beings, but no such, provisions are being taken to stop that. And what shall be the reason for this?
I don't understand. I don't fully understand your questions, but I understand that you asked me about the war in Ukraine and
yes,
how
ma'am.
this war.
Ma'am, shall I write the question again on the chat
Okay.
box?
Sora, mettimi la cuffia. It's a long question. Ok, sebbene i trattati. This is a good answer, a good question, but of course, geoethics cannot give you satisfied your question. I can personally express my opinion about this. Of course, the war, the current war in Ukraine is a war that can jeopardize the balance, the geopolitical balance in all the world. I think that are a negative thing. In general, war are something that is against the dignity of the human being, and in that dignity is the fundamental pillar of geoethics. In my view, this war, instead of favoring or foster the energy transition, instead of favoring to overcome the ecological crisis, this war will divide too much population in the world and government. So I'm very pessimistic about the solution of environmental global problems in this moment. Because also because the world create separation, create not common vision, and avoid that human beings feel themselves as terrestrial citizens. This is only what I can see. The problem are not the treaties, the signed treaties, but the willing of the ruling, the government, the ruling classes to respect treaties for us to respect the dignity of humans.
Yes, ma'am, I got it. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, is there any other question, or your question is being answered, Roshan?
Yes, ma'am, so kind of her. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So, okay, we have already passed 11 minutes of our time, stipulated time. So we have to end the session here. It was a very enlightening, enriching session, and I hope that we start working on this aspect of geography, that geoscience, that is geoethics and georisks. And definitely we will be getting in touch with you whenever we'll be needing help. Okay.
Yes, and I take the occasion to inform you that now there is a new journal, scientific journal, Journal of Geoethics and Social Geosciences, that will be a completely free journal for authors and for readers, and I invite you to propose articles to this new journal. It was created, has been created with the aim to give the possibility to all, also young people, to submit articles without fee.
Yes, yes, thank you. Yes, I have received the link. Yes, I received the link. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank
It's
you
a
to
very,
you.
it's not an ending. I hope that it should be a beginning of
Yes,
yes. Okay, thanks a lot, Dr. Sylvia, and to all the participants. We end our session here. See you again in the next session.
thank you.
Thank-
Bye.
Bye.